the room has used or deployed to production GraphQL? Nobody. Okay, so you're in the right room, apparently. Although if something goes wrong with my demo, I have no one who can help me. So usually I need like one or two. That's fine. It'll be okay. All right. So nobody in the room is using GraphQL today. He is, okay. But he's not here. He's technically not in the room, in fairness. Okay, so anybody using REST APIs? Okay, all right. So we're gonna talk a little bit of that. First, though, before Jeff didn't go into this too much. This is the United States. I am from there. So as far away from an ocean as I can possibly be in North America, that's where I live. I grew up like right on the coast, and now I live so far away, but that's okay. Jeff Strauss lives America close, not Dutch close. He lives about 300 miles away in St. Louis, and so we are both speaking at a conference tomorrow, Wednesday, in Lithuania. Why? There it goes. Okay, way over there. And so if you notice, what's halfway, not halfway, but like my favorite bar in the whole world is on the way to Lithuania. So we decided we would stop at Arn's Nest and have beer, and while we're here, we may as well speak at a meetup or something. So you will probably find us there later. In fairness, though, Jeff, and you can confirm this, my second favorite bar in the world is Zilt, which is like right over there too. So that may explain some things about the two of us, just kind of in general. So.
Will you put that on the meetup?
Put it on the meetup? Yeah. Okay, yes. Later on, after we get kicked out of here, we may or may not, but probably may, end up at Arn's Nest, because it's literally a block away. Okay. Jeff, your clicker is terrible. Okay, so there is a website called, and I shamelessly steal all their data in this. So the Star Wars API, right? Everybody familiar with Star Wars? That's the one thing I love about things like this is no matter where in the world I am, I can say Star Wars, and everybody knows what that means. So the Star Wars API, just for the record, I'm going to show you this real quick. It's kind of awesome. You can do things like, is that too small? Yes. Okay, hold on. Is that better? Okay, so I can go /people1, and I can click request, and it's got to give me Luke Skywalker. Or I can get rid of people. I can just go people, and it's going to give me if my internet works even at all, which it doesn't. It would give me a lot of other things, but that's the only part, literally the only part of the demo that requires internet access. So don't worry. Okay, so because I cannot rely on internet for any demo that I ever give anywhere in the world, I have shamelessly stolen their data and created my own Star Wars API. And I'm pulling up some code real quick early on so I can do the same thing. Is this big enough? And the white, you guys like the white for demo purposes, right? Nobody likes white when they're actually sitting at their desk coding. So I always have to remember to switch it over. But the white, so basically what this does for me is if I come in here and I go localhost films or localhost, I get the films, right? And then I can say, hey, here's the characters. Who will be people one? Obviously Luke Skywalker, no question. People 2, C3PO, right? Okay, so I have this set of data, but who said they use REST? Lots of you, almost everybody. What's the huge, massive problem with REST? Well, okay, let me ask a different question. Who controls? Like, you are in control of the front end, the back end, and the database. Like, you own end to end. I have 3-ish people in the room, right? So I'm primarily a front end developer, and most of my clients will not let me touch the API, right? You do the front, you like build the whatever, you don't touch the API, we've got the API. It's usually a REST API, and it never is what I need, right? Because I want to show all of the films with the character names listed. And what do I have to do that? I've got to pull films, and then I have to pull each individual person. I've got to make 27 different API calls. And that's considered normal, and I hate it. So we're going to talk about a slightly different way to deal with that. Nope. All right. So GraphQL. GraphQL is different than REST. I'll just put it that way. So none of you, well, you got called out. You do GraphQL. Do you have GraphQL in production today?
Yes.
Okay, do you do the .NET version of it? Do you Apollo? What do you use to implement? You didn't realize that I was gonna, I'll stop asking you questions, it's fine. Okay. Right, because GraphQL serves a great purpose, because here's the reality with GraphQL. It used to be that this was how the internet worked. You had a laptop or a desktop or a browser of some sort that would touch an API. And that was very easy for you, if you control the whole thing, to build your API to support the website, right? That's what we did. The problem is, now we have other things. We have native applications. We have wearables. Anybody have an Apple Watch or some sort of wearable device that has an app on it? We have refrigerators that have like their own refrigerator applications. And each of these things will have slightly different requirements, because the watch is not going to display all the same data that the website does or the native app does, right? You want trimmed down data, you want different shapes of data, you want to do things differently. And so what you don't want to have to do is have your REST people, whoever owns the backend API, to create custom endpoints for every single thing you want to do, right? We don't want to have to deal with that. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to use GraphQL to kind of deal with that. And so let's go back to the Star Wars API. We have a film or a person. And that person is defined in a certain way. In REST, it's not at all, right? If I go /people, is there any contract whatsoever that defines what comes back here? You can send back whatever you want. It doesn't matter, right? So I go /people, and then I have to just trust what the fields are that comes back. And what GraphQL does is says, okay, let's start by creating an understanding or a contract of what these things mean. And then once we understand what these things mean, let's let you, the caller, decide what you want. So it's called GraphQL, which is graph query language, right? Okay, so here's a film. A film has a title, an episode, the opening crawl, the director, all of that stuff. All of the good ones, by the way, George Lucas. All the not good ones, other people. That's my personal opinion, but it seems to be shared by the vast majority of individuals. And so what we need to do is we need to create an understanding of what this is. And then once I do that, I can stand up an API that says, hey, here's the things that are going to come back. You decide what you want. And so there's a couple of pieces to a GraphQL. So I'm going to walk through the pieces, and then I'm just going to open up a browser, or not a browser, an IDE, and we're going to kind of have some fun for a little bit. So GraphQL introduces this idea of a schema. Right, so we have schemas in databases. GraphQL, Graph Query Language is query, it's the same thing. So we're going to have a schema around the data that we have, right? So I know that this is what makes a film. Why can't I just create a schema that looks similar to this, right? So types in GraphQL, just real quick, you can look this up, it doesn't matter. You have int, float, string, boolean, and ID, right? That's what you get. You don't get anything else. You can create an object, but other than that, that's about it. And we'll talk about that here. So you just take these types and drop them on top. So title is a string, right? Episode ID is an int. Opening crawl is a string. All that stuff, you just kind of create this thing right here. Now I have a schema. It's discoverable. It's understandable. You understand how all this stuff works. So I take that schema, and then I add to it a thing called a resolver, right? And so, oh wait, on top of the schema, I also have to identify kind of like what you can do with the API, right? So you have the schema, the types, but then also, hey, this particular API has one thing on it, it lets you get films. That's all it does. Right? So I have a GraphQL API, you can get films, and the schema of that film looks a certain way, and I can identify all of that. I can filter things the same way, director string, episode ID int. I can filter my API on two things. If you have a RESTful API, how do you know what you can filter on? How do you know what you can search on? Hopefully they document or guess, right? In GraphQL, it's explicitly stated in the schema. You can search on director and episode. That's it. Can't go put in the opening crawl and hope that it's going to work. So we have the schema, which has the data types and the queries, and then you have this thing called the resolver. The resolver is your code, right? You're going to build something. Does it skip for you too, or just for me? Where you're going to say, hey, get films. Let's look at what get films looks like for a second. You guys, I know I'm at a .NET meetup. I'm a JavaScript guy, so I'm going to apologize right now. But I'm going to do some stuff in JavaScript, and if it freaks you out, I'm sorry. Ask lots of questions. It's fine. So just looking at this, what does it look like we do, right? I've got my get films query from the schema, right? I have get films. I'm going to do a get to my RESTful API of films, and then I'm going to filter the results based upon the query that you sent, and I'm going to send all the results back. I'll walk through this in a second, but that's kind of the idea. This is kind of gross, and so Apollo has this stuff built in. I am using Apollo, and here's why. One, Apollo is becoming the de facto standard GraphQL engine, right? If you're doing GraphQL, chances are you're using Apollo because most GraphQL implementations are. Apollo is a JavaScript library, I'm sorry, but it's fine. Because what I'm seeing a lot of people do is you have your backend team, right? Your .NET developers, your Java developers, or whoever, and they build these APIs. And then you have your front-end developers that are working in JavaScript, React, Angular, whatever. Who uses React in the room? Who uses Angular in the room? It's about half and half, a little bit more. Any other JavaScript framework? Vue? None. See? Zero. Jeff was hopeful there would have been one. There are zero. Okay. Now, for those of you who kind of left, Jeff asked the question for a reason. Vue is getting there. I'm I'm seeing less and less rooms that have 0 hands. And you know, I'll have a few hands now and then. Over time, that will grow. View is pretty great. How many of you get scared when you have to touch the front end and let somebody else do it? All right, I got a few of those people. Okay, excellent. So don't worry. But what I'm seeing more and more of is the REST API exists, right? So let's build something on top of it in Apollo in JavaScript and just kind of set it over top my REST API. Don't go mess with your REST API. Don't change it. Don't just let your backend developers build the RESTful APIs. Well, let's drop GraphQL on top of it with Apollo. All right, so let's look at this thing. All right, I have. Is that big enough? Nope. Big enough? Yeah. I see it's a different window, and of course it doesn't like expand all of. Okay, so I have my GraphQL API, and then I've got my RESTful API already running. Right, I showed you that, and now I have my GraphQL API, and I'm going to show you where all these things kind of sit. I have my type definitions, my schema. Look at this right here. I've got my film, it's got a title, it's episodes, it's all this stuff. I've got my people, I've got my starships. I'm just defining my types. And then look at this, I've got get films with director and episode AE. So I have defined everything. And that's important for a reason. Then I have my resolver, which says, hey, get films. This looks a little bit different, and I'm going to explain to you why. In my slide, remember I wanted to like show what we were doing. So I go to localhost 3000 Star Wars API films, right? Or I go out to the cloud, or I do whatever. Apollo gives us this thing called a data source. So I just pull, and then if you look at my data sources, look, I've got localhost 3000. So it just kind of obfuscates it away. It does some caching for me. It's kind of awesome. And then all I do is I pull in my type defs, I pull in my data sources, I pull in my resolvers, and I spin up a server. That's it. That's my code. That's all there is to it. So then check this out. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to start it up again just so, okay. We're going to go to localhost 4000. All right. Now, here's the beauty of GraphQL. So this thing comes built in with Apollo. You can turn it off. You don't have to. But it's this little playground you get. And look at this. Did you see my code? This was my code. This was all there was to it. There's nothing else. There's nothing hidden. Resolvers, type defs, data sources, that's it. But look at this. Everything's documented. I've got docs, get films, returns these things. Hey, it returns characters, which also has, so it's because I have this schema that's defined and gets returned as part of the query, it's self-documenting, right? So anybody who's consuming this API can go out, pull the schema down and say, oh, here's everything that happens. And look on my get films. I know what I can search on. Everything's right there. I don't need to look at the code to see it. I can just query the schema to see it, and it gives me everything I need. Okay, so here's how this thing works. Check this out. Minimize that. Okay, so I have get films. Episode ID 4. And I am returning, check this out. Okay, what do you want to see? You want to see, let's see, at least the name of, because it's a title. See, remember when I typed name and like it went away and I just said whatever? It's a title. There you go. Okay. Or I can get rid of that completely. Delete that. Run it again. Did it just freeze up? Oh. Also, look at this little red thing over here. Okay, here's the, okay. you, my friends. I know nobody raised your hand. I've got one GraphQL person, and I'm not going to pick on you too much. Nobody else raised your hand. But we are pairing. Does anybody pair on a regular basis? A few people. See? Take that information back. We've got it. Anyway, never mind. We have some holy wars over whether or not pairing is the only way to do things or is ridiculous. It's one or the two. It's never like, sometimes it's great. It's either like the only way or stupid. So for you right now, there's only a couple things I want you to call out when you see them, but this little red thing over here on the side means broken. So just say, hey, broken, and then I won't waste any time thinking about it. I'll just say, oh, okay, because if I'm not passing something in, I have to do that. There we go. Okay. Now you know it is your responsibility to identify these problems. It is no longer mine. Okay. But we also want not just the title, we want the director. Boom. Or I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to say director George Lucas. I'm going to run that, and now I just have the George Lucas ones. If I take George Lucas, okay, so that in a nutshell, now I've got all the other ones. Okay, J.J. Abrams is great. I do like him. Just. Oh yes, question. I'll just reply, or I'll just say it out loud. Go ahead.
Yeah, I forget, what is your data source at this point?
Okay, my data source right now. Great question. So the question is, what is my data source? My data source is what happens when I run this get film. If we come back over to my code, and I say my resolver for get films, right there, pulls my get films method from my data source. My data source says, hey, get films goes to localhost 3000 films. So I right here, notice this right here, see that? This is my API that all it does, I mean, like, let's be clear, this isn't fancy, it's all just hard-coded. Like, here's my films, if I format that, and so it's clean. Like, this is my film, A New Hope. If I change that to A New Hopes, and restart my service. Now what you'll see when I run this is you'll see a get to that API endpoint and A New Hopes, right? So I've got my GraphQL server is hitting my REST server and pulling back the / films and then filtering it appropriately. Does that answer your question? No. Excellent. Keep asking, it's good.
Well, but you still get the data out of JSON, so that kind of implies it's still on right?
Gives you a microphone.
Okay, go ahead. Jeff tried to get me to do it, and I refused. Go ahead.
Hello? Yeah. Well, you still pull your data. I don't think it's working.
No, it goes to the recording only.
Oh. Yeah.
Now you're on the phone.
Okay, so if I got it right, you get all of your data out of a JSON file.
Yes.
But that still implies that it is some kind of a front-end construction. It's not really a back-end, yet you said you're talking to a back-end REST API.
Right. So fantastic question, and I will clarify this. My RESTful API, this right here, so it's a Node.js API, but it's just an API. I could just as easily be pulling from a database as I am from this JSON file. Either way is just as fine, right? So for the context of this, the important part is I have my browser, hits my GraphQL server.
Which is also inside the browser.
Which is, no, it's on the back end. It's a localhost 4000. It's a server that's running, and that server then turns around and goes and hits that REST server that I have no control of. I could either be calling out to Star Wars API.co or com or whatever, or my local host. Either way, doesn't matter. I don't call out to the main one because internet is ridiculous usually when I'm presenting. Yes? Throw it at him. Just throw it at him. Okay.
Okay. You just did George Lucas.
Yep.
It's like a string property, but are there more like link constructs? So like, or starts with invariant lowercase,
Okay.
or more
All
advanced
that's happening.
querying, not based on properties, but based on a link query type.
Okay. I get, okay. I get there kinda in a minute, but I'll go ahead and kind of just, all that's happening in my result. So if you do star dot whatever or implement some, you can implement that on the back end. All I'm doing is I'm doing a hard equals. So if I come back over to my resolver, basically I'm just saying, I'm filtering, so that's a Lodash filter, but I'm just filtering based on the arguments that are passed in. I could do whatever I want to.
Yeah, but the question is, does GraphQL as a standard define certain types of constructs in the query language to have options for this? So even in your schema, you have options to do advanced querying without implementing it in your backend?
So that's a great question. I have not seen that. That doesn't mean it's not true. I haven't seen it, and I have not had to do that. Yeah, anyway. I will look it up, though. And I will get back to you. Unless you already know the answer and you're just trying to catch me. Okay. Because those are usually the best one, is like if you already know the answer, then just share it with everybody. Okay. All right, anyway. Okay. So I've got this get films, my title, my director, all of this stuff. What I really want is, notice if you go back to the Star Wars API, when I do a film, I'll do it here, I have all these people. And really the whole point of this is I don't want to have to make a whole bunch. I just want the people to show up in that first query. So we have this ability to define, in GraphQL, we have this ability to define sub-objects, right? So I have my main object, I've got my film, but then I can say in my schema, really the Star Wars film didn't look like this, it looked like this. I had characters, I had planets, I had starships, I had all of these other things that were in there. And so what I want to be able to do is in my schema say, hey, guess what? There we go. At least you guys can hear it click when, so you know, at least some of you can. Like, you know I'm hitting it. Okay, right, so I have, in my film, I also have characters, which is an array of people. Or I have planets, which is an array of planets, right? And now I can use that with the thing called so a person just, I want to call this out. It's not just the bracket that defines the subject, it's an array, because here I've got a homeworld that's just, well, like, Luke Skywalker's homeworld is
Tatooine.
Tatooine, thank you. So what is planet 1? Tatooine, right? We know that. Planet 2 would obviously be Alderaan. It's the second planet mentioned in this. Okay, anyway. Okay, anyway. Hoth is from the 5th movie, for the record. Okay, so we have this thing called a sub resolver, right? So I had my sub objects, and now I can say, and now I've got to define in my code how I go get these things, and I go pull them out. And so the way I do that, that's way too small. So forget that. I'm just going to go straight to code. What am I showing you? Okay, I'll just show you this, and then I'll get to it. Okay, so for a film, like remember I had a query get film, and I kind of said how that worked. Now I have a film, and hey, if I'm querying planets in the context of a film, what's it going to do? It's going to hand me the film, and then I'm just going to go get the planets, and I'm going to filter on my own, and then I'm going to return back the planets. That's terrible. Okay. So here's what that looks like. Here's my film. And I have my characters, and I have my data source out to get people, which is going to make a call to /people, right? And then I just drop those people that are in the film in there, and we go. So let's do that. And actually, just so we're here, I'm calling /films. Nope. Calling /films in my RESTful API. Let's add people to this. All right, so how do I do that? I want characters. All right, who said that? You're my new best friend. Good job. Excellent. Okay. What do I want? I want their name. Notice, unlike films, people have names, not titles. So I want their name. See, you guys are getting it. See how that works? That's nice. I like it. Yeah, okay. Shh. You didn't see that. Okay. Because obviously, actually, no, let's actually fix that. Okay, height. Here's the problem, right? So if I go back to my films and instead I go to a person, look, height, for some stupid reason I can't define, is a string. Because the developer of this API is weird. So it enforces that, right? So I'm going to come back over here, and in my type def, in my person, where's my person? Notice I have height as an int, and mass as an int too, and neither of those are correct. So I'm just going to change those to strings. So what was interesting there that just happened? Okay, string. Save. Okay, so what was interesting there that just happened? Not only do I have a schema that defines how things should be, it also enforces the results against the schema, right? If you get data back that doesn't match what it's supposed to, it's going to throw an error, right? So it has some built-in safeguards that make sure that it's doing things the way that you want it to do it. So, okay, I'm going to restart my server. Let's go back here. There you go. Now it works, right? So it's almost as if I had planned that so I could show you how that worked. It's a lie. I did not, but we're going to go with it. Okay. So that's sub objects, sub resolvers, sub all this stuff. How? Turtles all the way down? Yes. Yes, I have one and two. Okay, excellent. Because it's like, how far does this go? All the way down, right? Because characters, as you saw before, have a home world, right? And so I don't know why I'm clicking over there to change that. I want to be over here. I want their home world with the name of the home world, right? That doesn't exist right now. So we're going to come back over here, and in my resolvers, I'm going to say, hey, guess what? I have people. And people have async. Do they have planets? Or do they have home worlds? And that's an interesting question, right? So, and that's why I'm doing this like the way I'm doing it, because people have home worlds. The fact that they happen to be planets, it's not async planet, right? It is async home world. And I'm going to copy this because I don't want to type a lot. But I get a person, right? I get my, you should only ever have one home world, right? If you have more than one home world, yeah, no, you can't have more than one home world. And I know that because in my schema, if I go back to my type definition, look, home world is a planet, it's not an array. That's going to come into play here in just a second, right? Okay, so I need get, what? Planets. And then I am going to filter planets based upon the person that's passed in. Yep, okay. And I'm going to say person dot homeworld equals, yes, equals, planet dot URL. Now, what is return? This is JavaScript code. Like, I'm sorry, this may freak you out. Planets is an array. I'm calling dot filter on an array. What does that return? It returns an array. What does this need to return? A single thing, right? Not an array. So I'm going to do sub 0. There's one thing that is guaranteed. This will not work. So we're going to have to work through it. But, so first thing, data source, right? I just need my planets. Get planets. Planets. We'll save that, and then I'm going to restart. It worked. Okay. Beer's on me. Okay. And Tatooine. C-3PO, also from Tatooine. Is that right? R2-D2 from Naboo. Like, I don't even know if that's right or not. It's not my data, not my fault. Okay, but that's kind of the idea, right? But now I have homeworlds. Homeworlds have things too, like they have people that live on homeworlds, and so that I have to go and define what that looks like. You have to define all these relationships. And because you have to define them, you don't have to worry about circular dependencies or any of that stuff. It's fine. Okay. So now I have, look at this data that I'm getting in one query. In one query, I am getting a list of films that also get a list of characters that get a list of homeworlds. And in my standard REST API, this would have been like 45 different REST calls, right? Now that you would want to start adjusting your API in that case. And here's, so somebody's gonna call me out on it. You haven't yet because you're nice, but I still made all those RESTful API calls, right? I'm not pretending those calls weren't made. Two things did happen though. My data source cached my call, so I only made one call. Look at this. If I come back over here, look. Films, people, planets. I went and got the whole list because it's a small list, and it cached it. So I didn't have to go get it a whole bunch of times. I got it one time, and I just thought of why it wasn't working earlier. Okay, but that's fine. I got it one time, and that's all I did. So I should have gotten this planets list for every single person, but I didn't because my data loader cached it for me. Now, the other thing that's better is these two things are sitting on the same server, or at least in the same network, as opposed to being on a browser. If you're going to have to make 21 API calls, is it better to have them on machines sitting next to each other, or on machines on the other side of the planet from each other, right? I mean, so that's another advantage. You push those calls down, have all the filtering done right on a server right next to it, and then push the results back. Right, that's the key. Okay. I'm just looking at the time because Jeff went way over. Yes, please. Cube, you just wanted somebody to throw the cube to you. That's
so you're basically downloaded all the data from endpoint.
Yes.
So if there will be billion of people, not 100, you will download like 2 gigabytes.
Yeah. You don't do that, right? So I downloaded all the data because I can't trust the Wi-Fi, right? What I would do realistically, no, I know. I'll answer your actual question, not the one I pretended you asked, because I could. Okay, right. So typically there would be a search, there would be filtering, there would be all those things, and that's why I say a huge amount, right? Let me go back to this. When I say, right. When I say give me the homeworld for Luke Skywalker, I'm not going to go pull the whole list of planets if there was a gigabyte of planets. I'm going to go just do /planet/1. I'm just going to go get that one thing. And then I'm going to hold on to that. And then, so I will have to make quite a few API calls still. I'm not going to download and cache the whole list every time. I'll go get the one. Now, notice Luke Skywalker and C-3PO both have the same homeworld. So I still will only make the call to /planet/1 once, and it only caches it for the duration of the one call. So I make the call, it prevents it from calling it a whole bunch of times in this one query, but then the next time it's going to go and do it again. There's cache management built in, and there's all that kind of stuff. Was that your actual question? No.
No.
Okay.
I mean, when you're caching this data,
Yep.
You showed that you're cached films and peoples and homeworlds. And how do you know, not you, but how Apollo server knows that it's actually something that it can cache? So it's not 2 gigabytes of JSON.
Well, I'm not going, okay. So if it's 2 gigabytes of JSON information to begin with, I'm not going to pull all that down from the API at all. I'm going to filter that first and foremost. Now, Apollo doesn't know. Like, it's going to hit an endpoint, and if that endpoint tries to push 2 gigabytes of data back down, that's terrible. Let's not do that. But it's not going to know, right? That's something that you're going to have to know and code around that. You really want to say something.
So but when you say you're going to filter that, I'll take the cube. So when you say you're going to filter that, you mean we're hoping at that point that the REST API that we're hitting has a means for you to do that and not pull it all at once.
Correct.
Because now we're dependent on the REST API again, right?
So I don't want to pretend that this will like magically solve everything.
Okay.
It gets us close, but there certainly are some things. Okay. I'm gonna like plow through some stuff real fast, so that you get kind of the big picture, and then I'll show you some stuff because we've only got a couple minutes. So okay, I'm gonna walk through some slides and not demo anything, and then I'll kind of demo the whole thing all together here. So what about changing data? So everything's a post, which may be super weird for you. So mutations are the things that are used to change data, right? Because in a RESTful API world, what's the difference, right? You've got a get, and if you want to change data, if you want to change something in the REST world, everything's a post, right? So you post back to the server, and if you're posting, that means you're adding something. If you're getting, it means you're retrieving something. And that's the whole point of REST, is it's based upon the verb as to what thing you're trying to do. In GraphQL, we use a thing called mutations, which is mutating data because it sounds more complicated than just changing data or altering or something. We have to use mutations. And those are defined in the query just the same way, right? So I have a mutation called change population that's going to modify the population of a planet. Or I can have a mutation called add planet. We don't do that a whole lot, but every once in a while, you might add a planet, right? Remove planet. Every once in a while that might happen. Rarely. I'm not going to defend them, but they did only destroy one. They tried to destroy more, but it didn't work out. Okay, so then you have a mutation. And then the same way, right? So the same way I had my queries, I have my mutations, and in this case, I'm basically just going in and pulling my planet, and then I'm gonna modify my planet. Right. I'm not gonna demo that yet because I'm gonna demo it all together so that I end on time. Maybe I still won't end on time, but that's fine. Is that fine? Yeah. Okay, it's fine. I didn't ask you. I only asked Eric because that's all that mattered. So, okay, but the title of this talk is Real-Time Serverless APIs, right? So I haven't talked about serverless yet. I haven't talked about real-time yet. So I'll get to both of those things right now. So real-time APIs, sometimes they destroy planets. Right? And what happened, okay, who has ever written code that calls an API, displays stuff to the screen, and then every so often has to like go back and ping the API again to see if things have changed, or like you write a chat, or you write, you know, quantities or something, and you have to go, long polling is what we call it, right? I don't want to do that. What I want to do instead is I want the server to tell me when things change. And I want it to be built natively into the APIs that I'm using. And so GraphQL has this thing called subscriptions. And it's all WebSocket based. And it basically means, hey, give me the planets, but I'm going to subscribe to planets. And so when a planet changes, it lets me know what's going on. Same basic idea, right? So I have a type of query, I have a type of mutation, I have a type of subscription. And then Apollo has this thing called pub/sub that allows me to subscribe to a queue. And anytime somebody posts to a queue, things change. Okay, so here. I'm going to change things pretty drastically for just a minute. Boom. And this other one, Julia Child, out of the oven. Julia Child, does Julia Child exist in the Dutch? No. Okay, I don't have time. Okay, never mind. Ask me later, I'll explain. I have a completed one already done that I'm gonna come over here, wave my hands and say, hey, look, it's done. Okay, all right. So now I'm gonna run this one, and I'm not gonna show you the code. You're gonna believe me that it's there. And I can show you what's there because I'm going to refresh this page, and I'm going to click on schema, and now you're going to see a couple of different things. Not schema, docs. Boom. I've got get films, get planets. I have 2 mutations. Right. And then I have whether or not a planet has changed in a subscription. So my change population, here's the change population right here. I can change the population of planet number 4 to 3,000. If I get planets, planet number 4 is Hoth, which now has an unknown for some reason I don't understand, but that's okay. Is it still? Okay. If I change it to 3,000, now I run it. Now it's 3,000. Okay, yay. Okay, so I can modify the population of planets and see. Let's do this. Let's do a subscription. What was my subscription called? Planet changed. And my planet changed. I'm going to have my name and my population. And that's, notice it's doing nothing, right? So I'm going to actually pull this over here. Am I?
Probably. It's not complaining.
It's not complaining.
Yeah.
You're completely right. Okay. So let's do this. So you see my subscription going over here. I'm going to change the population of planet 4 to, let's say, 13,000. I'm going to run that, and look at this. Look at what happened over here. It pushed back and let me know, hey, Hoth changed to 13,000. Now it's still listening. It hasn't changed, right? So what happens if I come over here and I do mutation, Death Star, of 4. 2. They've already been, how many times do we have to blow them up?
Okay, that's fine.
The reason why I'm doing 4 is because I already have the subscription running for, you guys are terrible. Okay. Okay, we'll do 2. Although I did this, it isn't. I did it in the wrong one. I'm going to do it over here. Okay. Boom. Oh, it's broken. Does it say? Okay, it doesn't say. 2. We'll call it an integer. Come on. Oh, it's still broken. Oh, hold on. Death Star. URL is int. Oh, why is it broken? We've been talking about GraphQL for an hour. Somebody tell me why it's broken. Because I have to pull back something, right? Let's just pull back name of population. Still broken. Planet name 2. Why? Expected name found int 2. Oh, because I'm stupid. Okay. No URL. Thank you. Oh my goodness. See, I'm trying to hurry because beer is waiting on me. And so, look at this. Look at what changed over here. Right? Everything just blew up and it's all broken. Okay, anyway. Thanks for that. Alderaan was peaceful and now it's broken. Okay, so that's GraphQL. Whirlwind tour, we can talk about it more later. But here's the beauty of this. I have this thing all built, all ready to go, all done. And I can, using, so there's a, Apollo, another reason why I love Apollo is because the docs are phenomenal, like just fantastic. Anytime a tool has good docs, like usually that's the key indicator of whether or not I will use them. Angular docs are better than React docs, so that's an exception. But other than that, okay. So there is a whole thing on how you can just take this exact thing that I've just built and push it out as a function, an Azure function, just like that. The only difference in the whole thing, and I know I'm over, so I'm just going to show it to you, is if, notice right here, over on this left side, I have, who uses Azure functions today? So does this look familiar to you in any way? Right over here on the left side, I've got my Azure function built inside Visual Studio Code. Do you guys not use Visual Studio Code? Who uses Visual Studio? Like the full-blown, okay. It's a good tool, I like it, it's fine. I like Visual Studio Code because it's awesome. It's open source, it's built in, do you know what language Visual Studio Code is built in? JavaScript, Electron. So when Microsoft needed to build a cross-platform desktop application, they went with JavaScript. Okay, just my little bit there. So now, in my index.js, I've got this thing called, instead of Apollo server, it's Apollo server with an Azure function. Everything else is the same. I'm pulling my type, and then I'm just spinning up a server. And then I do func host start. Anybody do the function emulator? Right. And I can spin up and deploy my Azure function right there. It blew up because, I paved my laptop. And then I can come right here to functions and like deploy it and push it right there. So we can talk about that outside if you would like to. I'm not gonna hold everybody up for beer. But the whole point here is this. One, since nobody in the room, I spent a lot more time kind of demystifying GraphQL because nobody in the room is sorry. You exist as a person, I know. Everybody except for one person in the room had not yet used it, so we kind of spent a lot more time on that. But here's what I want you to walk away with, right? You have a RESTful API that exists today, most likely, right? There is very little harm in laying this GraphQL layer on top. And we can talk about the downsides outside too. Laying a GraphQL layer on top that lets you highly manipulate that API on the server side instead of doing it on the browser side. And you can query things and you can do real-time updates out of the box in a super easy to use wrapper that you can deploy out as a function with no effort at all. So, okay, so that's me. And I'm over, I know, but it's Jeff's fault, so I don't care. But thank you guys for hanging out. I bet you Eric probably wants to say something. Do you want? Okay, so thank you guys very much. Appreciate your time.